Hi, everyone. My name is Chitra Vairavan. I'm staff at the Eastside Freedom Library, and I'm also hosting the Artist Talk series on consent, awakening, and reclamation, featuring artists of color and Indigenous artists. We're going to be in conversation about our practice, our labor, and our dreams, and finding a new way forward. I'm really looking forward to this time, and we're opening up the series with the amazing Gabrielle Civil. Gabrielle Civil is a Black feminist, educator, poet, writer, and also teaches at the California Institute of Arts in critical studies and creative writing. Thank you so much for being here, and I'm just happy to see you again. It's been a while.
I know, I'm so thrilled. I'm so excited. And also, before we do anything else, I just have to show off this incredible photograph by my friend Denny Eagleson. Whenever I'm on Zoom, I always see like amazing things that are in the background and I always want to know. So I figured people are going to be like, what is that thing? And so, okay, I've told you all. So you can focus on our awesome conversation.
And that's an embroidered
Yeah.
by my aunt. So there you go.
Chitra and I have already talked about the embroidery.
Yes.
And about how gorgeous, how perfectly it matches actually what Chitra has on. And so I especially appreciated that, the coordination. Yeah.
Beautiful. So tell me, I don't want to start with how are you? But I want to know what has been bubbling for you creatively, I mean, in this time of living in a pandemic?
Oh, wow. That is such an intense and amazing and important question. And I want to thank you for asking it because I think as much as you can't escape the conversation of the pandemic just because it's the nature of our lives, specifically asking not even just how are you, which is a really important question to ask, but what is this doing to your creative practice?
Yes.
It is really a wonderful question to ask and to ask again. And I know, and I personally kind of witnessed the power of that question when I taught. The semester is just ending for me now at Cal Arts, and I taught this amazing class on letters and conversations. And I was very thankful that happened to be one of the classes that I was teaching while this whole situation started to unfurl and then really change the way that we're living, not even just in this country, but around the world, right? And the reason why I was excited about it is because the whole premise of the class had to do with basically expression and intimacy across distance. And so we were kind of primed. We had already been talking about what it really meant to have a conversation in different forms of conversations, body conversations, breath conversations, written conversations. And when we had to go to remote and we were on Zoom, I just asked a similar question to what you asked me, like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to break you out into these Zoom groups. And why don't you just say a little bit about, like, how has this been affecting you as artists? They went wild, you know what I mean? They were so happy to be able to talk about that with each other. And I feel like for me, I'm also really happy. I mean, even what I just did in my response, I am still deeply processing all of this as an artist. I'm not sure yet what this is really going to mean for me because so much of what I've been up to in the last 6 to 8 weeks has been trying to foster and hold my students who are artists and trying to help them so much that I really haven't had as much time for myself to really understand what it means. I had a bunch of stuff planned that got canceled, like a lot of people. And I've had the most beautiful and gracious conversations with people who had planned that we'd been planning. Like, for example, an incredible artist named Todd Gray had a show called Euclidean Grigri at the Pomona College of Art. The Pomona College Art Gallery, excuse me, that's what I want to say. And we had been talking maybe almost a year about a new performance that I was going to be doing in association with that show. And clearly that's not happening, right? And in fact, they had to shut the whole show down, or I mean, everything, so many things were canceled. And I think one thing that's happening for me is grief, loss, I mean, I was supposed to, I've been for the last couple of summers having really incredible experiences at the Seattle Festival of Dance Improvisation, and I want to lift up Velocity Dance Center in this moment. And in January, with three incredible dancers, Neve Mazik Bianco, Fox Whitney, Randy Ford, and myself, we had something called Wild Beauty, which was sort of like a Black movement ritual for MLK Day that was happening sort of in this dance context, but bringing a lot of my performance practice and a lot of my kind of ritual presence with these kind of dancers, dance makers, and they're also kind of performance artists as well and do a lot of things, those amazing three people. And we, like we really were starting to build something, and they invited me to come back this summer to lead an Embodying Justice workshop, and they're doing it virtually. But I realized, I was like, you know what, I don't live in the kind of house where I can lead, where I feel confident being able to lead a kind of dance or movement oriented thing. I can't do it. So I feel loss and grief around certain things.
Yeah.
I also feel that I'm starting to have almost like a really intense chrysalis moment where it's possible through practices of divination like tarot, through Zoom yoga with my incredible teacher who I love, through, and his name is Armin Manakin, and you all should look him up too. Just through the kind of reading that I've had time to do, I feel like, you know what, don't despair. Something else is going to happen, but it is going to be about patience. And I'm just going to have to hang in there. And that's not always my strongest suit, because I want to do and I want to make, but I'm going to have to slow down. And that in that slowing down, maybe something else that I don't even know what it's going to be can come. So that's a little bit about where I am.
And that leads right into, I feel like, where I want to head, which is that creative liberation practice in these times. What does it mean to embody a creative liberation practice in times of a pandemic? And it feels like completely like you're breaking a wall just in that existence, in that
Right.
ability to create against that, the shelter in place kind of rush, stop, don't engage, keep to yourself. What is an audience right now? There's no audience. Everything is interpreted through technology now, and we're more removed from each other, and having these flat engagements interpreted through technology all of a sudden. And like so many of the photographs in this book and so much of your work is like live people and energy exchanges, and
yeah,
and so now, so now all the people have disappeared and it's just us with ourselves. But I still feel so deeply that creative liberation in this time, or like for yourself, is so critical, because now I am my own audience. When I go out into the field and I do a random improv, there's nobody watching me, but I know I'm having a conversation with myself. And I was just curious how that's been for you. Have you had time? I know you're just getting done with the semester.
Well, some interesting things. I mean, I'm resonating so deeply with so much of what you're saying. I think it for for performance, what does this even mean? It is so huge, because what happens in a performance, it's not just what someone is doing on a stage. It has to do with the relationship between all of the bodies in the breath in the space together. That audiences co-create the experience, and that if you do a run of a show, if you make an art action or a live artwork or something, and you do it 2 or 3 times with different people, that work is different, even if your steps or your gestures are the same. And often for me, they will be slightly different in response to what's happening in the room. How can you channel that energetic through Zoom? I mean, that's really, 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 really hard. Now, I'm going to lift up the Playwright Center right now, and I'm going to lift up Penumbra, where, I used to live. I lived in Minneapolis and I lived in St. Paul. I used to go to Penumbra all the time, and I am so amazed and grateful to actors, for example, who have been able to have the training, so that acting on Zoom is hard. I mean, I saw kind of a combination live reading / really like a Zoom performance, because the actors weren't reading, for Legacyland, and that was through the Playwright Center. And so you can't look at the other people. You have to look like at the camera so that they can see your face. So it really, there are these other voices or these other people, but you can't see them. It's a completely different craft. And yet I'm going to say, in the audience, something did happen for me in that. So it's both and, in that I'm very nervous about what's going to happen to the field of theater and what's going to happen, but maybe even less than the field, but to actual brick and mortar theaters, to theater companies, to people, to dance companies that have worked so hard to build audiences and to have systems. This is incredibly disruptive, and it's really awful. At the same time, I've been so impressed with how people have managed still. I saw Jumatatu Po put something together through the FuseBach virtual festival, like in Texas, where it was just like all of these people in Zoom. It was like queer dance party. I mean, it was like,
I think I saw that. I saw that too.
Did you see that?
Yeah,
it was like looking at people through windows. Like if you were in New York City and you saw people in a window or something. And I was like, yes. It was just like, and then Jumatatu had 2 different Zooms. One was on the computer and then one was on the phone. So you had all these different, I was like, okay.
It's next level to me. I'm like, so much to navigate. You're designing, composing everything through these multiple view boxes.
I mean, it really, it's so mediated. It makes me think of, I saw Yari Travieso's piece about, I think it was like the Medea project at Break sometime, where it was both a live performance and a TV show at the same time, or I saw Christian Jadahi did something like that at Red Cat. Anyway, just to say, like, that level of mediation has been a part of experimental art making for a while, but just to think that any kind of art making with an audience that you would want to have now feels like you either have to do that, or it's an accidental audience, or you're going out and then the way you're getting the audience is to write something down. It's almost like, have we all become Ana Mendieta, and then you just like go off and do a piece and take a picture, and then like you show the picture and it's like, this is the thing that I did. I mean, I hope to be as good an artist as she was, but it's really hard. But what you said at the beginning is the most important thing, which is about the need for still embodied creative practices of liberation.
Absolutely.
And that we really need that even more now when we feel so confined, and to recognize that confinement is terrible. And it helps to this is like nowhere even near what like incarcerated folks have to deal with, who like don't get to have Hulu or whatever. But I just feel like to get to really feel like, okay, can you sit with yourself? Can you deal?
Yeah.
And also that confinement doesn't have to mean the opposite of liberation, that in fact, there are ways for us to really try to practice and understand approaches to liberation in a different kind of way, and then to look around and see, well, what is it that we can use and embrace or learn from in this moment? So it's just practicing. I'm not necessarily an expert on that yet, but I feel like the way I'm listening to the birds, who are so loud now, I'm just like, okay, I'm learning something from them. Like, okay, these birds, they're not playing around now. I know they're just like, what? We got it. We got it.
I'm with you.
I'm just learning. So I think it's hard, but again, it's the end of the semester. I'm looking at my student work, and I was so scared. I was like, this is going to be such a disaster why can't we all just say like, this was a mess, and like, let's all just go home and rest? Like, I really felt like maybe we all needed to do that. And maybe we did. But in the meantime, a lot of my students, what happened for them in their own practices was like wonderful. And and I teach at Cal Arts. I teach performers and writers, but also visual artists, sculptors, dancers. It's mixed. And so they got filmmakers. What happens if you're a filmmaker and you don't have access to any equipment anymore?
Yeah.
What if you're a photographer? What if they got really just
Folks
completely,
aren't able to go back to their studios where everything
they
is.
had to leave, and they were politely but firmly asked to leave the dorms. I mean, just, so it all was different. But
Yeah.
then what they made from that, I was like, okay, people, the creative impulse is alive. We're gonna make it, and sometimes we're not gonna make it, and we're not gonna make the thing. We're gonna rest, but the cellular capacity of making will still be in us, and I'm hopeful that yeah, I'm hopeful about what can come from that.
Yeah. I think it's, for me, also a healing practice in still continuing embodied movement, even if it's just for yourself. Um, it shifts the energy, right? I mean, it still enables a kind of flow, even if we're asked not to flow, basically.
And so what has audience meant for you in the past? Have you found when you're making work? Yeah, I'm just curious, because having seen you dance both in the Ananya Dance Theater and in some of your own solo work, your work has always felt very generous to me, and also deeply grounded in a kind of personal exploration or revelation of knowing. So I'm just curious, what has audience meant for you?
It's a deep question for me. And all my mentors come in my head first. Um, so I want to invoke the amazing Lori Carlos,
Yeah.
who I've had the privilege to work with, and it's such a blessing and just force of nature. Um, who would say, F the audience. If they want to leave the theater, you're making great work. You know what I mean? It's saying something, right? And then our other elder, Jay Otis, who would
Oh,
say,
right.
yeah, if you're gonna F the audience, you better wear protection.
Right.
Basically, it's these two voices in my head. The thing is, within my solo work, I should say, it's so internal. It begins internal, and I feel like I'm performing when I lose the audience, when I
Mm.
completely forget about them and I'm just duetting. Not that I'm not forgetting about the lighting, and the feeling and being seen, knowing what I'm doing, what parts I'm hiding, what parts I'm revealing, what I'm trying to say with my body, but I'm really dancing when I forget that they're there. And I know that I did what I needed to do when somebody asks me something and I have no idea what they're talking about.
Right.
Because you
went there.
went into a meta moment, within a moment that the audience just gets, the external part of, right? Because you're actually transforming in it. And so for me, I just feel like they matter just as a portal to reflect to reflect the work afterwards, if you can say that.
Yeah, I think you really can say that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think audience for me is really interesting, because there are things that I can do for, in front of, with an audience that I can't do as easily in my everyday life. And yet I also understand that often the audience has no idea what I am doing, why I'm doing it. You know what I mean? So it's like a really interesting thing. And so the things that I'm doing are not necessarily to please the audience or to entertain the audience, although at times I register that I am pleasing or entertaining, but at other times I'm alienating and problematic. I mean, so, or they're, I mean, I think about a piece that I did. I often think about comedy and other work, and I've done different versions of it where I make a cream pie in front of the audience, and there's just, and then I pick it up and I'm walking in the audience and I'm speaking, and it just, you can feel that anxiety. They just don't know what it is I'm about to do. And I think
You're
for
holding
me,
attention.
you can
holding
feel,
it.
I mean, and it's just one person just carrying something, but the whole room is just
What's up?
different.
Yeah.
what's about to happen. And then what I'm saying in that moment is like these cut ups of these racist jokes and like stuff about love. I mean, and so just the combination of all that together it's a lot. And I've enjoyed it so much doing that. I just have enjoyed, because I was so trained to be nice and to be sweet and to be good and to not make anyone uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to think about how performance can open up a space, or that an audience can open up a portal to be with people in a different kind of way. So that could actually to allow for people not to determine everything that you do, allow for yourself to uh, not care as much about appearance and instead be engaged with existence or being. Um, it can be to recognize or allow for these other people inside of yourself to come and join the crowd that's there. There's just so many different things that can happen. I mean, it takes a lot of skill to do what you just described, which is to say to have all of the technique down and all the technical aspects of a performance action where the light is working and you know where the marks, you know where you need to be. I mean, that's it takes a lot, especially if you're working in theaters or theater spaces and you're not just like in a gallery space, or you don't go out and do like a street action, or because and as I recall, like Ananya will take people out sometimes. She did. I mean, and then she used to talk about, when she was becoming a dancer, and they would go and they would dance out in the street to tell pregnant women to eat vegetables and stuff. Like, I mean, so I mean, that's a different kind of, there's still
It's
technique in
different,
that.
yeah, totally. That, and it's generous in a totally in another way. It's so generous, and it's because I was raised on Ananya. You know, it's like my mentor mom, but she's the one who taught me that theater and light and technique and being a professional artist. I never considered myself one until I became a founding member in 2004 of Ananya Dance Theater. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if it wasn't her guidance, I wouldn't know how to talk to tech. I wouldn't I wouldn't have any idea, you know, I would just be dancing without anything else, right? Without all the moving parts of what it takes to be um, sharing it.
But see, the moving parts are so huge, and that's why it's awesome to be lifting up like Lori Carlos, lifting up J. Otis Powell, lifting up Ananya Chatterjee, lifting up. You could talk about Dipankar Mukherjee and Meena Natarajan. You could talk about Lou Bellamy and then his daughter Sarah. But I mean, there's like different people in the Twin Cities who have been doing all kinds of work for a long time, and
Mhm.
people can like their like different productions at their different shows more or less than others, whatever. You could have your gossip or your whatever. But the reality is that there was like a generation of people who really laid a platform, a framework for certain kinds of artists in that space
Totally.
to not think about like having professional development and professional training as some kind being in some kind of opposition with pure artistry or engagement with the community. See, that's
Absolutely.
really important to me, because being a community artist doesn't mean not knowing how to talk to the tech for your show. I mean, that's not what it means.
That's not what it means.
But there needs to be more opportunities then to help support people to actually know how to do that. And because it's hard, and tech is so stressful. It is
It
such
is
a,
so stressful. As even
oh
if
my God.
you're a solo artist, you need like a person with you to be talking to the lighting person, to be talking to the stage people, to the manager. You know, you can't just be in your work when you want to be
No.
in your work.
But see, that is what you just said is a pro tip though, because even if you're doing a solo show, if there's somebody who can be there with you to help actually hold what's happening in the tech realm, what it is that you want. I mean, dramaturgs are helpful for that sometimes. But even if you don't need to have someone who's actually a fancy dramaturg, just have your friend go there with you, because it's a really vulnerable moment for you, especially if you're showing new work that you've never shown before. This
How
is where you're
scary.
actually trying to get the light, the sound, the rhythm, the spacing, the set, the mark, all that stuff. You're really trying to now materialize it. And normally it's what, like a day or two before you're open. and you have what, an hour
You have an
or two?
hour. If you're
You have
sharing
like
an evening, you
1
might have
hour.
even less.
You might have even less, and it could be a person who's never met you, never seen your work before, doesn't know anything
Yeah.
about you, and it
It's
could
like,
be in a space
here's my
where
art.
I know, and like we're
It's
having a
serious.
problem with our lighting grid. I mean, like there's all this other stuff that's going on. So to be able to just roll with it, and also to be realistic. I remember early on there was a piece I did, Heart on the Sleeve, in Chicago. Through the field was having an open field where people could come. It was at Lynx Hall, and it was really important for me to go and do this work at Lynx Hall because I had a kind of a racist experience with an usher there who was like, oh, well, because I was so excited, I'd been in the space. I'm like, oh, I want to do work here, you know. And I went to the person who was volunteering. I said, oh, well, what is the application process? And he looked at me and said, well, sometimes we do spoken word in February, but really this is an experimental venue. And I was like, wait, what? I mean, it was me
Yeah.
and my friend, and we were the only people who had even shown up for this experimental sound thing, that I was like, why do you think I'm here? Anyway, so it was really important to go back. In fact, some people would have said, I'm never going back to that place. But I was like, oh no, I got to go back there and figure it out. So I applied to this thing, got in. But I came and I was like, okay, for the lights, I want to do this and this and this and this. And the man was like, okay, look,
We can't do
we
any
have
of that.
35 minutes. What is the most important thing that you want to have happen in this show? I mean, I needed to learn that. I mean, I'm not Pina Bausch. They're not going to like build a whole miniature dollhouse for me or whatever. I was coming as one person in a whole series. So I needed to be able to communicate to this lighting and sound tech professional.
Right.
Like, okay, these are 10 things I would love, but here are the 3 most important things for the show. Here's how we can learn. I mean, I had to learn how to do that. Yeah. And I'm still learning, you know?
Yeah. I want to go back to all the elders and just leaders you invoked earlier, who are in schools of thought in themselves, giving so much to younger artists, building their own ensembles, building their own art spaces in the Twin Cities. Because I really feel like it's kind of lacking now for the newer artists that are coming up, and trying to figure out how we continue to share that knowledge and bring up people who just don't have the technical vocabulary to talk to tech. You know, at numerous times when I've had lighting designers like completely mess up lighting cues.
Yeah.
Even if I tell them like on this, this minute. Anyway, but then Mike Wongan, who's an amazing soul, like, created an incredible lighting spread for me when I did late night at Pillsbury House. And, and so like they're both true. There's generosity, there's all of that, but then you also get taken advantage of if you don't know what to ask for and what's even there.
Or it's not a great moment for someone to be trying to teach you. It's too much pressure. It's a lot of stress. So like the moment of tech is often a terrible time to try to be learning how to do tech. That's what's hard. Yeah. But wait, I have to lift up another person. And as we probably continue to talk, more people would have come to mind. I would be so remiss if I did not lift up Eleanor Savage.
Oh my God.
Because Eleanor Savage was actually the founder of Naked Stages. Eleanor Savage was the one that brought like Lois Weaver and Sharon Bridgeforth to town to come work with artists. And Sharon, of course, is amazing. If people don't know Sharon's work, and Sharon has like such a beautiful relationship in the Twin Cities, first through Naked Stages, but then different kinds of projects with the Pillsbury House. Yeah. Eleanor also was one of the 2 founders of Queertopia. Mm-hmm. Eleanor started Vulva Riot. I mean, it's just all these different things. Mm-hmm. And I think a problem is, and I don't even live in the Twin Cities anymore, right? So that's another thing. There's a lot of people who have been a part of kind of Twin Cities arts community that don't live there. But I come back. I still keep my connections in the Twin Cities because it's been so important to me. And
you never fully leave when you're in art.
That's true. That's also true. The Mississippi River, just like you float back in or whatever. But yeah. Even when I was, because a lot of the time, I'm keeping it all the way real with y'all. A lot of times when I was first living in the Twin Cities and I moved there in 2000, and then I didn't really leave until 2000. I don't know, 13, but then I came back. I mean, whatever, but a lot of that time was tumultuous. I felt very uncomfortable as like a Black person. It felt very isolating.
Mm-hmm.
I felt very unseen and unloved. I mean, so I don't want to lift it all up as to say it was all perfect,
You're right.
because it wasn't. But what was amazing was the artist development opportunities. And I do think that, I mean, I was lucky enough to have been involved with, or have had, um, got to show work in the Red Eye Works in Progress series. And so that's when I made Infestation of Gnats, and Murray directed me there. And then I did, Naked Stages, and it was at Intermedia at that time, and Murray directed me there. And, and then Monque was in my cohort there. So that was like really powerful, in Mali and Van Avery. And then you had the Center for Independent Artists existed
Yes.
that time. And so that's the Raw Mystery. I mean, and then Monque came and ran
Monthly.
that after. I mean, so there's like all this stuff, and then being able to present at Patrick's Cabaret.
Yeah.
And I remember when
it was a real rich scene, to be honest. Yeah.
it was huge. And then, and then not even too long ago, just a couple of years ago, I was going to some candy play party thing at Madame. Did you ever go there?
No.
That was a wild and amazing. There were just all of these different, there was a place called K-Pack. It was the Pillsbury House. There were just all of these different sort of do-it-yourself art spaces. And in those spaces, you could start to learn some things about tech in a different kind of way than when you're at the Pillsbury House Theater with a really big board, or you're dealing with Heart of the Beast, and the instruments and stuff are tricky and hard to deal with. You know what I mean? And so if you don't come with some experience or skills with it, it can be really frustrating and hard. So now the question is, what do you do when those spaces don't exist? And could this terrible moment that we're all in also be a moment to pause and say, like, okay, we're going to have faith, and we're going to believe that we're going to reopen up, and that we're going to insist on still having art spaces. And we're going to insist on working together in a way that's going to be holistic and respectful and generative for all of us. But we're going to need to imagine that. We're going to have to really think about, like, what is that even going to look like? How are we going to do it? And it's not even about the material side. It's really rethinking, like, when should tech, how should, that's a really good example of something that we've inherited, a way of putting on a show and saying, like, what a professional show is. We've inherited that. Has that worked for us? I don't know. Maybe this is a chance for us to think about that differently, and to talk to each other about it, and imagine it, dream it. And then as we open things back up, in a theater, the real thing that I want to open up is like the Spy, everybody knows, but that's going to be the very last thing that's going to open up. But before that, theaters are going to be late in the game, because you're gathering groups of people together. Okay, so we've got time. I mean, when I say theater, I'm thinking, like the space of a theater, but that's like a dance show, that's live performance, it's all of it. So, okay, but we're still going to do it. We're going to find ways to do it. All right. What are the different new ways that we can think about when we're able to do it again? We don't need to just replicate what we've done before. We can come up with new possibilities.
Right. I'm going to let that be there, because I really want to talk to you about one of your pieces that has haunted me since I saw it at Pillsbury House Theater in 2012.
Yeah, right.
Fugue. Is it Fugue, right?
Fugue, yeah.
It just moved me, just the way you talked about how, you had to report back this experience of traveling to Haiti, I believe. And it was, you had this pile of soil and the suitcase, and you were shoveling soil back and forth and saying this incredible monologue about your experience, but it was also like completely critical of extraction in, really marginalized communities and poor communities, and what does it mean for you as a diaspora to go back and to be carrying this. And for me as diaspora, it really resonated, because we're constantly just in different worldviews and worlds all the time. So I really want you to talk about that piece.
Oh, I would love to. Thank you so much. And it means so much too that you remember that work. Um, that was a piece that was originally made. I've seen a lot of the work that I do in performance, I don't do very often and I don't redo. And not because I think there's anything wrong with doing things often and redoing it, but it just hasn't been for whatever reason, the way that I've made things. I stew and I write and I create and I do all this stuff. And then I'll make an art action or I'll show it. And then it just feels like it's happened and it opens up a door to go then do something else. But this was a work I really wanted to do again. And I first did it in 2011 in December, and it was approaching the 1-year anniversary of the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. And so there was an organization in Haiti that invited me to come and do something that was related to the commemoration. And so for me, there's parts of it where, I mean, there's a shovel, there are suitcases, 4 suitcases, and then there was about 500 pounds of dirt. And there are moments when I like shake the earth, literally, in terms of thinking about that earthquake. And then thinking about what does that mean as a diaspora person, a person who's like, the suitcase is like leaving, the suitcase is returning, the suitcase is visiting relatives, the suitcase is when you like go to Haiti and you bring like this big suitcase full of stuff to give people, and then you like try to pack it with all this sort of contraband food or like liquor or like your Barbancourt rum bottles or whatever it is. So suitcases were really important. And in fact, there was one amazing Haitian American artist who I know who said that as soon as I pulled that suitcase out and I opened the suitcase, boom, she was like right there in terms of diaspora identity. Like and just the suitcase. I mean, my dear friend Rosa Mondes King, she wrote something once called Born Under the Sign of the Suitcase. Like, what is that diaspora movement? Migration, immigration with an I, immigration with an E. And what is it that we carry? What is it that we don't carry? And when you think about diaspora grief, how much of it also is riddled with this guilt and this feeling like, who am I to even grieve this? I wasn't even there. I'm not allowed. There are all of these other extractive forces. Am I also an extractive force? Am I also something that is contributing to loss, or am I also a part of the loss as what's happened, but one that I myself am not allowed to mourn or shouldn't mourn because it came from a set of choices, or just really in which ways am I too much in, and in which ways am I not enough in? And I think that for me, that's a lot of what that particular work, Fugue, was about. And then also kind of fusing together in a really kind of cosmological level. I mean, I was doing a lot of things with just my own memory and inheritance of certain kinds of Wadun rituals, and especially the soundscape in that piece. There were different kinds of like drum sounds that were sort of mixed in with Charles Aznavour songs, who's like this French singer from the 50s and 60s that my father really loved. And, you know, but it starts off with like a Bach fugue, you know, that Powers Biggs is playing on the organ, and, you know, and then I just like have this shovel. And it's really intense. And then to then take the shovel into the 4 directions and to invoke the crossroads, invoke death, invoke ancestry, and then to have the massive, just like to have a massive dirt on the stage in the Pillsbury House Theater. So when I first did it in the gallery, that was one thing, and it was surrounded by these artworks, but it was really different to have that, I thought, on the stage in a theater. Some people might think of like, I don't know, Beckett or someone with sand, but for me, it was really like bringing Black ancestral dirt. I mean, that's like that free Black dirt, Aaron Sharkey, Janata Petrus energy, just like bring the dirt here and then be in the dirt. Like, what is that going to be like? And then where are we going to go from there? And so it was a really powerful experience, me doing it that night at the Pillsbury, because it also happened to be the night, you know, it was the night right before the clocks changed, or the night that the clock changed, where you get an extra hour, you get the magic hour because you fall back So it was about distance. What's that called? Daylight savings time was ending. And so after that performance, I sat with friends and we talked and talked and talked and talked, and we hit the magic hour, 1 a.m., and we told stories from 1 to 2, and then it was 1 again. And that felt to me like that somehow, that maybe was when the piece ended for me, right there.
Yeah.
You know, in Swallow the Fish, there's this essay I talk about with Aftermath, where the show, the action, the performance action ends at different times for different people. And especially for you as a performer, I mean, people might clap, but it might not be over for you.
Yeah.
Right.
And it never is. The clapping never is. Not for me anyway. But it's
half
like
the time I'm like, why are you clapping for this? I don't know. Like wasn't, oh God, it wasn't what I wanted it to be, or just, oh, right.
Oh,
we're
yeah,
doing it
right.
now.
You all
like I have to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that was, and then of course that was the first part of a trilogy. So that was Fugue, and then there was Fugue Accra, Dissolution, which took place then in Ghana. And then the third one was Fugue da Montreal, which happened in French Canada and was outdoors. And so those were the 3 works. And there will be a book, hopefully, that will also have some writing about those and images from that series. Because one thing I realized, I love my books. I love my books a lot. But my own diaspora heritage is actually not as represented in those books as it actually is in my life. And I'm sensitive to that. I mean, I think everything that's in those books is real. I mean, those are really part of my lives, but how to talk about diaspora identity is hard. How to talk about being, I mean, any intersectional identity, really. I mean, any intersectionality, how do you talk about all the different kinds of things that you are all at once, right? So what I'm trying to do is really build an archive of books, build a whole set of performance memoirs that all together could help to collect some things about my own performance practice, but also what we've just been talking about. We're really being honest and reflecting on how much of what I've done is about having been grounded in certain kinds of communities, and really see the ways that these works were generated through relation with other people and the different kinds of programs and opportunities that either existed already or that we made. That is, I think, a lot of what, and it's, you know, like Swallow the Fish is so much about the Twin Cities. And then there's still the Twin Cities for sure, and Experiments in Joy.
Too.
Yeah. I mean, definitely some bedrooms, Anemone for Pleasure Rebel. That was like Naslie's amazing series that took place at the Bryant Lake Bowl. Yeah, I mean.
And your actual Experiments in Joy.
Well, now that took place in Ohio. See, that's where you start to see me moving all around. That
and Mireille was a part of that as
she
well?
certainly was. I brought Mireille Regulus, or I invited Mireille Regulus, and she accepted the invitation. But that was what happened when I left the Twin Cities and was afraid of losing my kind of artistic context and community, and then used the opportunity of a job offer. I mean, it's really, I like to tell this story because if you're ever lucky enough to be in a position where someone really wants you to come and do something, and they ask you, like, what can we do to help you come and do this thing? Really ask for what you want. Really ask for it, because I did not know what could come, but for whatever reason I said, well, I would like to have a festival of Black women in performance here. And I want to be, I mean, I didn't know at the time that was even what I was going to say, because it could have been like, well, I need more money, or I need someone to come do my hair, or whatever. And those things would have been nice too. But the most important thing actually was that. And to his credit, the then president of Antioch College said, that's the best thing I've ever heard. Let me talk to the board. Let me talk to different people, and let me see if we can make that happen.
That's
and then
amazing.
they did.
Yeah, when you were talking about it, you're like, it was an email exchange with the president of the school. That's how this started. It's like, oh, wow, how did that happen?
I mean, and that's one thing. That's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other artist series that you maybe will do for the Freedom Library. And that's thinking about what is it to be a scholar artist, or what is it to
Yeah.
have these relationships with universities?
Yeah.
And they're often very fraught, those relationships, and they can be really contentious and hard to negotiate. And
Mhm.
also, there are institutions that have resources that can help to support artists. And also, scholars are artists of the mind. I mean, we need people to help us think through what we are doing and help to get our ideas together about the future, right? And so it's important to have creativity in these sites of critical thinking, right?
Absolutely. I mean,
But
I
it's
always
we, yeah.
think, and you've made this point before too, is know what to ask for. Um, and you didn't know you were going to ask for that. So there was an unknowing before you invoked it. And I think that that's also a power in a creative liberation practice, because there's always an unknowing until the moment happens. And then it's a claiming the moment kind of thing. And so it's such a beautiful craft and art to just to have that throughout your life, even in these academic settings or whatever professional settings you're holding, but to still know, not have anxiety around unknowing. And
Right, because I mean, and I'm so glad you came back to that, because it is a little paradoxical. I didn't know that I was going to say that, but what I said was the truth, right?
yes,
So, and I mean, and now what I know from that experience is you don't have to know beforehand what it is. The thing you have to know is to pause and check in with yourself
yeah,
and survey and scan for real. What is it that I want? And you might, I mean, even that, it might not be as finite or clear, but the real thing I thought was just like, don't have some prepackaged thing necessarily. Listen to what someone is actually asking you.
yeah,
And then take a minute and say, like, some people would say, like what you should do is like negotiate on this, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, I want to have this completely ephemeral thing where these people come and we do a thing. And and then that became experiments and joy. So maybe what I want to say is that when I lived in the Twin Cities, and it might still be true, but it was especially between 2000 and 2013, Minnesota had like the highest percentage or proportion of artist funding of any state in the nation.
mm,
And while we both were there, there was the state constitutional amendment, so that a certain percentage of whatever money is in the state has to go to certain kinds of art. I mean, that for me was amazing. And so it did create an environment where there were different kinds of programs, there were different kinds of things, and I felt like I did learn from that and from some other projects that I was involved in through my teaching at St. Kate's, because that, of course, was why I was in the Twin Cities at all. I taught at St. Catherine University for 13 years. I think I had learned from being in the Twin Cities how to go someplace else and like run an art program. I had learned how to bring people. I had witnessed from Ananya, from Eleanor, from Lori with late night. I had from Patrick, who created Patrick's Cabaret, but then
yeah,
there was Sarah Harris who ran it, and then there were other people. I just was in a lot of environments where I was watching people create these frameworks, so that I learned from that. And then when I left the environment, I could still take that and do it. And that, when we're talking about like creative liberatory like performance practices,
mhm,
that's another part of it, because there's your own artistic practice, but you're going to need a context, you're going to need a community. And that's what we were talking about before too, in this Zoom kind of confinement thing. What is the context? What is the community? But then I think about Marcus Young and Don't You Feel It Too, a true friend of St.
yeah,
Paul, a true friend of the
very,
East Side. I mean, and he just like put all those beautiful Don't You Feel It Too practices like right online. And he was like, okay, we're just going to have these online practices for a minute. You can stay in front of the Zoom. You can say hello. You can go out in the day, come back, whatever, but just the creativity to still have the container. I think that that's the thing, like how to create the container for people to connect and to go in between the individual liberatory practice and the collective, which is I think the thing we're all going to actually need to get to, right?
I feel like What you just said about just the amount of just rich support for the arts, the artists, the space makers, the creative thinkers. Um, it's its own pool of knowledge and making things happen that's beyond the institution. Um, or I wouldn't have learned anything. I wasn't institutionally trained. I was communally trained. I was Twin Cities trained
Mm.
as a dance artist. And it's so easy to happen in that space because of the richness of everybody you just mentioned. It's just brilliant. And it's completely, well kept secret, sort of. Now everybody knows, but
Well, Prince used to talk about it. Prince used to rap. No, really, that's my true artist mentor from Minnesota right there, Prince.
mm,
Because Prince was always like, I love Minnesota, and it's so cold. It keeps it cold. It keeps the mean
we
people
find a
away.
way to survive in the white landscape. You know what I mean? Like we
Oh,
build ourselves what we need, and we have the
magical
capacity to do.
landscapes. But wait,
Lori
you
Carlos
really?
used to say, people come back to Minnesota to heal.
Wow. And
They're
that's like,
always,
I mean, when you talk about Lori Carlos, then you're talking about Daniel Alexander Jones. Then you're talking, I mean, there's a whole lineage of people connected to Lori, connected to the Twin Cities. And it's a really interesting, I mean, if you know, or even if you look at Omi Oshun, Joni L. Jones's book on theatrical jazz, she lays all that, like Lori and then different kind of tributaries. And a lot of those people were in the Twin Cities. But I have to go back to what you just said. You didn't have dance train, like you didn't grow up taking dance classes?
Mhm. People think I
No
did.
way.
I mean, I took dance classes, but it was in aunties' basements. There's like four
That's,
or five aunties teaching my sister and I dance. And
that's
my mom
awesome.
always wanted to be a dancer. So it was just a part of how I grew up until I met Dr. Chatterjee, our fierce Ananya. Like I had no concept of being a professional artist until 2004.
Right.
That's, yeah. And it just changed my life, that whole experience, that this can be a livelihood or, you know, that's when it happened for me.
It's so interesting because Huey Wilcox, who also dances in the Ananya Dance Theater, she mentioned that too. I thought that she was like classically trained in her native China and stuff. And she's like, what are you talking about? She was like, I was taking tennis. She was like, I was playing tennis with a friend and they were like, oh, you move really fluidly. Do you want to try this like dance class? I was like, you have got to be kidding me. It is so
We were
wild.
getting people working in parking lots like, do you want to dance? Anani and I would go have conversations with people who have no dance training, just like, hi, would you want to move with us? Are you interested in dance? I mean, it was a beautiful time when the company formed. We
Oh,
were
I
all,
remember so many people. I remember like Beverly Cotman dancing and Sophie Liu. And I mean, I'm telling you, I think every year it's just, there needs to be an Ananya Dance Theater movie. I think I would love just for there to be a documentary or even a feature film. Someone could come and play you. I would love that so much.
um, so we're coming to a close,
Okay.
but I also just want to hear anything you want to share in this moment.
Well, I think I do, in the spirit of experiments and joy, I just always have to lift up the original Experiments in Joy artists who
Let
were
me
with me
let me make
in um, Yellow Springs, Ohio, back in 2014 when we convened under the Call and Response Symposium and then created the call for Experiments in Joy. And so, I mean, here we have Wura Natasha Ogunji, who lives in Lagos, Nigeria now, and Awilda Rodriguez Lara, who's in Puerto Rico, Kenyatta A.C. Hinkle, who is teaching painting in Berkeley at UC Berkeley. There's our lovely Marae, who's still in Minneapolis. Duriel E. Harris, who is a fantastic poet. Oh, so great, in Chicago. This is me, like mugging it up. There's my dear friend Rosamond S. King in Brooklyn, New York. And then this is a community member, Vernetta E. Willette, who sang at our big festival. And it was such a great gift. And she's now become an ancestor. And so it always is so special to me that she was with us and that she's in this picture. So I just want to lift them up. And I'm also happy, if you want, for me to just leave everyone with this score for Breaking the Frame.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Breaking the Frame was a score created by myself, Gabrielle Civil, and Stephen Houldsworth at the closing session of Culture Shift in St. Louis. And as we were thinking about where we wanted to go forward in shifting culture and transforming artistic modes, we came up with these 5 steps. Step 1, mark the frame. Step 2, identify the tropes. Step 3, queer the frame. Play, do something different. Tone, medium, materials. Step 4, discover something, create something proactive. Step 5, reflect, perform, discuss. In solidarity, enjoy. From November 19th, 2016, look at that date, November 19th, 2016, to now, May 22nd, 2020.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having a chance to just chat and kick it and talk a little bit about liberatory performance practices and our shared formation in the Twin Cities. I'm so excited about the East Side Freedom Library and the East Side of St. Paul. And I want to say I used to live not too far from Selbydale, and I would go to the Mississippi Market. And so I know, I used to go to Chang O'Hara's, I used to go to the Muddy Pig, I used to go to Bambalea, all those places. So I have a little bit of street cred, the Penumbra.
Hey,
I know
yes,
about it.
you do. It's not a
The
little.
Golden Time coffee
It's
shop.
significant street cred.
Yeah.
Please, these books are like archival of performance art, and also I feel like an archival of Twin Cities performance, in general.
Yeah.
All the people, all the collaborators, it'll just take you down memories. But thank you so much. This was beautiful.
Thank you. This was so much fun. I'm so honored to be the first person in this series. And I think, what a wonderful archive you're building just in these conversations. So thank you so much for consent, awakening, and reclamation.
Thank you for visiting our video. I'm Beth Cleary.
I'm Peter Ratcliffe, and this is Orso, the library dog.
We are the co-founders and co-executive directors of the East Side Freedom Library in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Our mission is to inspire solidarity, work for justice, and advocate for equity for all. If you enjoy our programming and want to support our work, please visit our website, eastsidefreedomlibrary.org.